Today we are mixing drums on this 96 channel SSL Duality Fuse console. Let's do this.
This video is brought to you by QuizTones, my all-time favorite app for learning frequencies.
A few months ago I did a session with one of my favorite drummers of all time named Pete Generous. This guy is one of the best in the world, I'm telling you. It was such a fun session. He's so easy to work with, and he's just one of those guys that can come in and really feel the track and do anything that you can imagine. So I thought it would be perfect to kind of revisit the track, bring everything back onto the analog console, and show you my entire process for mixing drums. We're gonna start off in the box doing some editing, doing some simple gating, some time alignment, and then we're gonna go to probably the reason why you're here. Really push these drums into the analog world and go a little bit crazy with the gear I have in the studio. First, I want to talk about microphones. Kick drum. We had two mics on the kick drum. Kick in, which was basically inside the drum, was the D112, classic, great mic. The out was one of my favorite mics of all time, the Telefunken U47. This mic actually didn't work that well because we had to record it inside our kind of small drum room. I typically like drums to be out in a bigger room, but we had a huge brass section coming in like immediately after the drum session, so we got stuck there, and the U47 didn't work that well, but it was fine blended in there. So for the snare drum, I actually had three microphones. First was the snare top, which was the top of the head, is the Shure SM57, another classic microphone. The bottom was the Neumann KM184, love that microphone on the bottom snares. And then I actually did a technique that I found through a video, and it was the first time I ever tried it, and it was awesome. I used an AEA ribbon mic, the N8, and I basically had it at the side of the drum. Hold on, let me grab the mic and the snare drum, 1 second. Okay, snare drum. So typically you'd have an SM57 as the top snare right here. Then you'd have a bottom snare, you can't see it, a bottom snare, so a microphone kind of on the bottom, right? So this is my ribbon microphone. So at the same time as having that top snare and the bottom snare, I had this ribbon microphone pointed directly at the center of the shell. So it may seem weird, right? I'm pointing it right at the shell here. But the thing is this microphone is a bidirectional microphone. That means that the front of the microphone, we're getting sound. The back of the microphone, we're getting sound. So putting the microphone directly in the center right here basically makes it act as if it's a top snare and a bottom snare. Oh my gosh, it's freaking me out, that sound. This was honestly an experiment, but it turned out so good, and I'm probably gonna do this every single time. Can't wait to show you. On my hi-hats, I had the Neumann KM184. Now on my toms, this is actually the first time I did this as well. I had two different ribbons on the first two toms and then the two floor toms. So on tom 1 and 2, I had the AEA N22, and then on the floor toms, I had the R92. The N22s, man, those were the best tom mics I have ever heard in my entire life. Like, I don't ever want to do drums without those. The overheads were another experiment. I went with two different sets of overheads. I was really only planning on keeping one of them, but I went with the safe option, which was the Royer SF12. So this is a stereo microphone. It's amazing. It's another ribbon microphone. Super good. Just put it right in the center of the kit. And then I also set up a pair of Telefunken ELA tube microphones. So these are pencil condensers. They're small microphones, but they're actually tube microphones, and oh my gosh. They're my favorite. I think they're my favorite all-time overhead microphones. All right, so now that you've heard so much about microphones, let's actually listen to how these drums sound.
So here is my session. It's gonna look a little backwards to you, but I promise there's a reason why I do this. In most sessions and on most consoles, on most everything, you usually start with kick as your first channel. Kick, snare, hi-hat, toms, overheads, rooms. For me and for working on this console, I found that I really messed with the kick and the snare the most, and the overheads and the rooms, like, take so little time to get them to sound right. And then they're taking up a big portion of the real estate right here. So basically I'd have to slide all the way to the left side of this console to adjust that. So what I did is basically just reverse the order of everything. The cool part about that is that my bass guitar and my kick drums are right in the same area, which is really nice because I can kind of finesse those together, and they're right next to each other. Plus, inside this room, the low end sounds so different when I move to the left side of this console, and it's honestly perfect right in the center. So to be able to EQ the kick drum without having to move over there, I know it's right. I don't have to roll back and forth to check it. So that's why it looks like that. Just have to get used to it. So basically, I've got my overheads here, my toms 1 through 4, hi-hat, snare top, bottom, snare double, which is that AEA N8 ribbon mic that is pointing straight at the shell. Then my kick in, kick out. I've got a couple samples here. This is like my kick room sound, and then my normal kick, and then my snare sample as well. So right now, we're gonna listen to the drums raw and just kind of see how they sound. All right, so sound like raw recorded drums. They sound really good, but obviously we need to beef them up. So the first thing I want to start with is explain my master bus. So I have master bus processing always on. So basically everything on the console is going to mix bus A on the console. That bus is being sent to a Shadow Hills mastering compressor, and then a curve bender EQ with a little low and high end boost, and then my SSL Fusion, which is built directly in on this console. I only have the vintage drive engaged. Those three things are so important when I'm even just starting a mix because, well, let me just show you why they're important. So I'm gonna turn this off, and we're gonna hear just the raw drums. And then turn it on. There's obviously a level difference. We're getting a little bit more gain, but there's this depth and feeling and smoothness already. So if you're starting from that place, you have to do less work on the individual drums to get them to sound good, in my opinion. Before we get to any EQing and compression and all the analog stuff, let's take these drums and we're gonna put all the microphones in time with one another. So we're gonna select all these drums right here, and we are going to add the Sound Radix Auto Align 2. So Auto Align 2 is being put on every single drum. Now what this plugin is gonna do is it's gonna analyze every single one of those individual tracks, and it's going to delay them to usually the snare drum so that everything is aligned together. This takes away any phasiness, it cleans up the low end and gives you a really good starting place to work with on the drums. I don't always do this, but as I said before, this song was recorded in a small room, and it kind of has a small room sound, a lot of reflections and stuff spinning around. So I want to clean up that low end as much as possible, and we do this with this plugin. So it's pretty simple. All we gotta do is hit align and let it play for at least 30 seconds. Now we wait for it to align everything. Sometimes when I'm doing strings, this takes like 30 minutes because of how many tracks that we have. Sweet. So it looks like it aligned everything to the snare bottom, which is perfect. Now let's listen to how the drums sound now. Such a big difference. The snare there's so much clarity in the snare now. It's not kind of washy. The kick drum has that nice low end. Let me turn off and on this plugin so you can hear the difference. Pretty awesome. Pretty freaking awesome. All right, so now we are going to commit all these drums. So I don't need that processing anymore. I'm not gonna adjust it. I'm not gonna change anything. So we're just gonna we're gonna commit all these channels. So right click, commit, and then make sure hide in, yep, okay. Perfect. We have the exact same drums now and they're all in line. Okay, so time to do some gating. Gating is pretty important. We're gonna use my favorite gate of all time, and it is made by Sonox Oxford Drum Gate. I don't think there's anything better than this gate, in my opinion. We're gonna first tackle these toms real quick. Toms sound really good on their own. Let's just listen to these real quick. Yeah, sound pretty awesome. They just sound very natural, very real. It's great. So let's start with tom 1. We're going to hit the tom right there. That's a pretty big difference. Bypassed. Obviously, we want to mess with the decay. So we're going to go to this decay. What I love about this plugin is you have an overall decay. So like if I turn this all the way up, right? It's just barely getting the end of it. If you make it really tight, it's super fast. So we can adjust this so that we get our attack really clean, which is great. And then now what's cool is since we have our attack settled, we can grab this guy and adjust the decay for that low end note so that we're not getting the cymbals. So basically, when he hits the tom, the bleed from the cymbals is gonna get quiet really fast, but it's gonna open up that low end of the tom. Yeah. We'll tighten this up a little bit. That's gonna be great. All right, now let's copy this over to tom 2 just to give us a starting place. We'll adjust this. Might just lower this a little bit. That's gonna be great. Let's copy this to tom 3. Yeah, that sounds great. I'm gonna bypass this so you can hear it on its own. And then unbypassed. Sounds perfect. Lastly, tom number 4. That's gonna be great. So let's hear the toms together. That's pretty good. So this is gates off, gates on. And if we add our overheads in here, super clean versus with it off. That's gonna come in handy once we add the compression, the EQ, all that stuff. Awesome. Now we want to look at our kick out. So this is the mic, the Telefunken U47 that I had an issue with, only because the room was just so small. So I used this out mic and it really all I got was an insane amount of bleed. It just wasn't open enough in that room. So this is what it sounds like. Tons of bleed. We don't want all that stuff in there. We want the impact of that low end and that's it. So we're gonna unbypass this. We're going to select kick. We wanna make sure we've got our decay right. All right, sounds pretty good. I'm gonna listen to our kick in here. There's a couple big hits in there, but that sounds really good. So we're gonna bypass this and then unbypass. Great. All right, let's look at our snare top. So the snare is really close. There's a ringy thing that keeps happening, and we just want to get rid of some of those cymbal stuff because we're gonna push this kind of heavy in the compressor. You don't want all that stuff to get super, super loud. So let's get our decay going. Great, that's perfect. We're just gonna keep that right there. We're gonna wanna do the same thing to our snare double. Sounds great. See how our snare bottom is. I'm not gonna put a gate on the snare bottom because I think it sounds pretty good on its own. So let's hear how these sound now. I'm gonna bypass these gates. Pretty awesome. That's already huge improvement. Gates are good, everything's cleaned up. We have room now to kind of do whatever we want. I want to make sure my kick and snare samples have the same waveform that was aligned so that whenever it's triggering those samples, it doesn't get all crazy out of time. So I'm going to copy my kick in down to both of my kick samples, and then my snare top, we're going to do the same thing. All right. So I've got my sample kick here. Yep. And then basically what I do this a lot of time on the kick and sometimes the snare, is I like to have one sample where I've got my kick in, out, sub mic, sometimes the effects, sometimes the overhead. It kind of just depends on the sound of those. Sometimes I'll take those out and just have the kick in, kick out, kick sub. And then I'll mute my room mic, chamber, and another room mic, and I will copy them over to basically another track that's a stereo out. So our first sample, these are both the same exact things. It's just one has the room and chamber stuff muted, and one has all the main kick in, kick out stuff muted. That way I have a stereo spread of that effect kind of sound, and then I have my mono kick. Anyway, this is what the room sounds like. I like doing that because then I can just mess with that kick and play around with it without that room stuff getting louder. And I like how the room is so natural. You hear the gun, 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 gun. I like those dynamics. It's really, really nice. So here is the sample kick with the kit. Muted. Basically, that sample kick's just giving me that kick out that I don't have that well. So the last thing is the snare. On the snare, I just kept this top A, top B, and the snare bottom mic, this kind of blend here. I'll let you listen to what this sounds like. Right, just simple snare. This is blended in with the rest of the kit. Muted. Very, very subtle, but it brings that glue together. First, we're gonna mess with the kick drums here. We'll start with my kick out. Let's listen to that. All right, so first we're gonna do some EQ. I'm gonna take some of this low mid around like 300. There's a weird kind of frequency at around 2K, and then I need some top end there. Let's see how that sounds. Sounds great. Now I want some dynamics. So I'm gonna start with some dynamics on the console to hear how that sounds. Now I'm going to insert on my kick in. We're gonna put a Chandler Limited TG1 limiter. It just adds a little something to the kick that I really like. There's some rumble in there we're gonna fix really quick. I like that. Great. So now on the kick out, basically just boost a tiny bit of low, take out some of the muddy frequencies here, and take a little bit of 1K out. Let's see how this sounds with the kick in and kick out. Decided to not do the TG1 limiter. I liked it, but I kind of don't like it now. We're gonna leave no compression on that kick out. I think it's fine the way it is. Now let's go to our samples. Let's hear those with the kick in and kick out. All right, we're gonna add a little bit of EQ to my sample kit. I just wanna take a tiny bit of 300 out and add a little bit more low end, so about at 60 Hertz. All right, let's see if that TG1 limiter works on this one. I like that. We're gonna keep that. I'm not gonna change the EQ or dynamics of the room at all, the kick room. It sounds great how it is. So let's see how this plays in relation to the whole drum set here. I like that. The kick sounds great. All right, snare top. Snare top, what do we got here? Sounds pretty boring, pretty lame. We're gonna do a touch of the 1176 for compression here. Sounds awesome. Now we're going to add some EQ, the Neve 1073. That might sound dramatic, but I think with the whole kit, it's gonna sound good. Sweet. So we're basically, with the 1073, we're boosting a bunch of low-end 110 Hertz, a bunch of high-end, and a little bit of 3.2K. Sounds awesome. I do want to add a tiny bit of EQ. I want to take some, like, 1.5K out. Awesome. Now let's add one of my favorite things, the Lexicon 480L. So we're gonna make sure we got snare plate is loaded. I'm gonna bring up these faders so you can really hear how this sounds. Give some taste. Adds a really cool snap, and we're gonna add a tiny bit of my Bricasti. We're just doing a small room, a really fast decay here, reverb time. Yeah. Awesome. Snare double. Just a reminder, the snare double is going into the side of the shell on the snare drum. Let's hear that real quick. It kind of sounds dead. Sounds like nothing's going on, but I promise it's important. So we're gonna add a little bit of EQ. I'm gonna take some of that 500 out. Good. All right, we're gonna add a little bit of compression. We're doing the 1176. Awesome. And then a little bit of Neve 1073 EQ. Let's hear it with the snare top. Okay. It sounds terrible on its own, but I'm just gonna play the snare top. Sounds pretty good. Now the snare double with it. It just has this loveliness. I don't know. I'm gonna cut. We're gonna listen to the whole drums, the whole kit, but I'm gonna cut that snare double. Double in. It's so subtle, but there's just that low, like, awesomeness. In fact, when we did these recordings, I brought Pete in to show him this, and I brought him in, I sat him down, and I had it muted, and he was like, oh yeah, sounds really good. And I was like, now, watch this. And I unmuted it, and our intern captured this photo. And this is the face that he made when he heard that snare double. It's really a cool little trick. All right, so snare bottom. This is gonna be pretty simple. Just doing a distressor to kind of match these 1176, and then a little bit of EQ on the Neve 1073. All we're doing is adding a tiny bit of that nice Neve high end. It sounds really good with the snares. So these are our 3 snares together. All right, and this is the snare with the kit. What else do you want? Sounds awesome. The hi-hat is good on its own. I'm just gonna take out some of the low end. We're gonna put a high pass filter around, I think it's about 90 hertz. Now let's get our toms sounding good. So the first 2 toms, we're just gonna go to this little fill moment here. I have the first 2 toms going to my Rupert Neve 535. I had originally had my 543s on tom 3 and 4, but I'm getting some weird noises and something's wrong, so we're not gonna do that. I'm just gonna use the dynamics on the console. So let's hear these first 2 toms. Sound pretty good. We're gonna add a little bit of EQ here, so let's listen to tom 1. Yeah, we're gonna add just a tiny bit of high end. We're gonna cut some of the low end out. And then I want it to peak a little more, so we're gonna add we're just gonna add a little bit of 3K on tom 2. Ooh, we got a lot of low rumble, so we're gonna see where that's at. Yeah, about at 300. I'm gonna add some 2K and 8K and roll off some low end. Sounds great. Tom 3. Oof. We need to roll a bunch of the low mids out, so maybe around 300, add some top end. Yeah. Great. Add some compression on the console. Ooh, now it's sounding awesome. Tom 4. Kind of boring. Let's add some EQ, add some top end. Get rid of some of that mud. And add some compression. Awesome. Now let's hear all 4 toms together. All right, to make these toms sound even better, we are gonna add the Pope Audio, the Bax 2020. This thing is incredible. So we're gonna bring up a little bit of the high end, a little bit of the low end, and it's gonna make these toms sound even better. Here we go. So this is the overheads without the Bax Andal EQ. With the EQ. Huge difference. It even makes the snare drum sound better. So we're gonna just do the whole kit here without the Pope Bax Andal EQ. Now we're gonna add it. It's just so good. All right, so now on the overheads, I watched a video a long time ago using the Rev 1 on the room mics and the overheads to create more of a room sound, and I loved it. As soon as I started working in the studio, I started kind of using this technique except with the Rev 5. So it's the Rev 5 on a percussion plate. We're gonna add that into the overheads, bring those up, and I'm just gonna solo the overheads and the Rev 5 so you can just hear how this sounds. It's kind of cool. Let's take it out and blend it in so you can really hear it. I took a little bit of low end out of it. All right, so we're gonna mute it. Unmute. All it does is give a little bit more life to the drums. Without it, the drums sound really tight, which is fine. But for this song, I was honestly looking for more of a natural drum sound. I didn't want the drums to sound like way overly processed because it's kind of a blues jazz song. Let's listen to the bass. I'm gonna go ahead and throw the TubeTech CL1B on because I can't listen to bass guitar without using that. And let's see how it sounds with the bass guitar. It's really close, super close. Let's hear how it sounds with the rest of the instruments. Really close. Okay. The last thing that we're gonna do is add some parallel compression to the drums. I love parallel compression. It's so much fun to play with. So I'm gonna switch you over to mix B. Make sure everything's right. So basically, how I have it routed on the console is everything goes to mix bus A. Mix bus A is like your normal left, right in your DAW. I have all drums also going to mix bus B, and then mix bus B gets routed back into A, and then I have a separate fader that I can move up and down and decide the level. The cool part about that is I can insert on mix bus B anything I want. So I have the Zener limiter inserted, and then the TG12411s by Chandler Limited, both by Chandler Limited. I've got the input gain on the Zener limiter cranked all the way up, and then I'm boosting a bit of high end at 8K on the TG12411 and a tiny bit of low end, I think at like 50 or 70 hertz. 70 hertz. So I'm switching you over to B so you can listen just to B and how that sounds. This is with the inserts on. Off. You're getting a really cool attack with that high-end lift. Of course, a ridiculous amount of gain that comes up. Now we're gonna blend our B compression, parallel compression and EQ into our signal. So I'm gonna mute the mix, mute the bass, just so we can hear the drums, and I'm gonna push play and slowly lift it up. All right, let's listen to it with the mix. It's a pretty big difference from where we started. Real quick, I'm gonna play you where we begun. So this is the mix with the bass and just the raw drums. And now this is all the processing that we did with the full mix. It's a pretty big difference. And that's it. That's drums using the best of digital and the best of analog.